Tonight, on Talking Points, Kim Jong-un and North Korea continue to provoke with their nuclear weapons program. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley maintains that the U.S. won't back down.
If the United States has to defend itself or defend its allies in any way, North Korea will be destroyed.
We sat down with Dr. Terry Louts of the Maxwell School to talk about the ongoing nuclear struggle.
But it's interesting because the South Koreans are feeling that this situation is not as dire as I think many Americans might.
After Donald Trump reportedly negotiated a deal with House and Senate Democratic leaders on DACA, some are unsure where he stands on the issue.
Bernie Sanders is leading a single-payer health care charge with his new bill. Some are calling it a litmus test for future Democratic candidates.
And on the other side of the world, Myanmar continues its fight against the Rohingya ethnic group. Myanmar says it's responding to deadly militant attacks. Others are calling it ethnic cleansing.
All that and more ahead. This is Talking Points. Today, the U.S. and South Korea performed a series of bombing drills over the Korean peninsula in a show of force to the north. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. Following another possible strike from North Korea last Friday, the nation's leader Kim Jong-un now warns that any additional sanctions or pressure will only serve to accelerate its nuclear program. That strike comes on the heels of the newest round of UN sanctions that were approved on September 11th. It's estimated that the latest missile puts the U.S. Pacific territory of Guam in range.
Many expect President Trump to highlight North Korea's accelerating nuclear program at his address tomorrow before the UN. And it's reported that Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are committed to maximizing the pressure on North Korea with more Security Council resolutions. But UN Ambassador to the United States Nikki Haley says the Security Council has exhausted nearly every option at this point. She said in an interview last week with CNN host Dana Bash that military options may be next. Nikki Haley basically saying that the President Trump's threat of fire and fury was not an empty threat and that we may have to take military action if North Korea continues to issue these threats.
It certainly seems as though she's meeting fists with fury and definitely a combative tone of nature, that she will not stand down to the empty threats from North Korea.
Well, I got to talk with Dr. Terry Louts about what Nikki Haley said and a lot more. Let's take a look. I want to start with talking about the latest North Korean news and what's happening sort of at the UN. You have UN Ambassador Nikki Haley saying that President Trump's previous threat of fire and fury like the world has never seen is actually a threat. It's not an empty threat. Do you think that it's being taken seriously when these sort of threats are made of complete annihilation of North Korea?
Well, the North Koreans are playing a very calculated game. They are ratcheting up their capability in terms of nuclear power, obviously, and missile delivery systems. And I think that they are not particularly interested in mutual annihilation. That it's ironic because the rhetoric that you hear from President Trump is very much like the rhetoric that comes out of North Korea and has for decades. So I think in a sense this kind of rhetoric is not terribly helpful because it appears that the only realistic option in this game, this strategy on both sides, is to sit down at the table and to negotiate some kind of a settlement.
And how does President Trump then get the Chinese to put pressure on North Korea? Because obviously China is not responding very well right now to the threat of sanctions against them.
The Chinese are not happy with North Korea. They're really caught between a rock and a hard place because Beijing does not want to see the collapse of the North Korean regime. They fought a war in Korea in the early 1950s. But more important today is the fact that North Korea is a buffer state for them. The Chinese don't want to see a unified Korean peninsula under the government of South Korea, which is an ally of the United States, where the U.S. still has 30,000 troops.
Now, we have reports saying that the United States and South Korea were doing joint military exercises over North Korea earlier today. Now, obviously, the rhetoric from the United States and President Trump has been very strong. Do you think South Korea is in the same boat? Are they worried as much as the United States is when it comes to North Korea and their nuclear capabilities?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the demands, not only by the North Koreans, but by the Chinese, is to stop these joint military exercises. They see it as a direct threat. So that's something that down the road might be negotiated. But it's interesting because the South Koreans are feeling that this situation is not as dire as I think many Americans might. And that's because they've lived with this situation for decades.
Nikki Haley, with what she had to say, and Secretary of Defense Mattis and President Trump, who exactly are other world leaders looking to? Who do you think they take most seriously?
Well, there's great confusion, great uncertainty about Mr. Trump's policies, as I say, where he might move. I think the speech that he gives in the United Nations that's coming up very soon might give us some indication, but the inconsistency is, I think, deeply worrisome for our allies in Japan and South Korea.
After the break, we'll discuss Trump's reported deal with Democratic House and Senate leaders, and we'll look at how some Democrats are changing their stance on health care. Stay with us.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
On Wednesday night, President Trump had dinner with Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, marking the second time this month President Trump worked solely with Democrats. While Schumer and Pelosi say a deal on DACA was made in exchange for tougher border restrictions, President Trump says it didn't go exactly as that way seems. Talking Points contributor Gilat Melamed is here to talk about the political implications of Trump's reported deal with the Democrats. Gilat, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So why is there a discrepancy over what was said between Schumer and Pelosi and the president?
Right. I mean, when you look at the statement released by Pelosi and Schumer from the dinner, basically what they're saying is that they reached an agreement on putting DACA into law. Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that there was a discussion, but no agreement was made. So it's kind of looking at it from different angles. I think the White House team is trying to, not that they necessarily disagree on what happened at the meeting, but they're kind of using language that downplays it, saying we talked about it, while Schumer and Pelosi are saying we're going to actually take action from what we talked about, trying to, you know, make it seem like they really got something done.
Gilat, congressional Republicans can't be very happy that President Trump has decided to work with Democrats.
Yeah.
How does this affect things moving forward, and how does it affect his image within the White House and those closest to him?
Right. I mean, obviously, him and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, he already has a strained relationship with them. It's not the best relationship. I mean, he was publicly feuding with McConnell last month. And now to have these two workings with Democrats, it kind of adds more strain to this strained relationship. And within the White House, I mean, it just shows, you know, we don't know who, if he was advised to have this deal with the Democrats, but it shows that he's definitely independent and willing to kind of do things on his own.
And what about the Democrats that are critical of Schumer and Pelosi for working with Donald Trump? I mean, shouldn't they be taking what they can get at this point, being the minority party?
Right. I mean, the reality is they are the minority party, and the fact that, you know, they were able to have this sit-down dinner and get any voice that they came in. Schumer and Pelosi came in with a whole list of things that they think Donald Trump would agree on to get by. But then again, you know, the whole stance of we have to take a really hardline stance against the Trump presidency does sort of contrast with a meeting in some people's
Going
eyes.
outside the D.C. bubble, though, this seems to be much of an optics issue. Is it going to affect wavering support within his base?
Right. I don't think, for the core, the hard right wing of his base, I don't think it's going to affect support yet. Breitbart, which a lot of his, the hardcore right wing people do read, had an article saying, they titled it Amnesty Dawn. So I think it's stirring up fire within them, but I don't think they're going to leave him yet. However, if there is no wall, and it's because of this deal he made with the Democrats, I think, and Steve King, the representative of Iowa, said also that that will be enough for them to leave.
And moving forward, who do you think he continues to work with more, Republicans or Democrats?
I think it shows that when the Republicans aren't getting done what he wants done, after all, they have a majority in the House, in the Senate, and with the White House, that he's not afraid to move to the other side of the aisle and get other goals accomplished through the Democrats. I don't think this necessarily is a pivot or a turning point in the presidency, but I think it sets a precedent that this may happen in the future, and if it continues to happen like this, then it may be a turning point.
Gilat, thank you. Definitely something to be looking forward to in the future. Thanks. Last week, Bernie Sanders proposed a bill that would accomplish his dream of single-payer health care. Now, in a Republican-controlled Senate, the bill doesn't have much of a chance, but it could have lasting effects on the Democratic Party. Talking Points contributor Dan Prager is here to explain why. Dan, thanks so much for being here.
It's great to be back. I'm excited.
So Bernie Sanders obviously knows that there's no way that this bill passes. He's not going to get a single Republican vote on this. But what's his prerogative?
Well, this is kind of all part of Bernie Sanders' plan for his revolution. He is hoping, first off, run for president, show the Democratic Party that there are liberals out there, that there are people who want his agenda implemented. Step two is move the Democratic agenda further to the left. The Democrats in 2016 had a big problem in that they didn't really have any policy suggestions. They were kind of mostly running on the anti-Trump party, and if they did have those suggestions, they didn't communicate them well. This is Sanders' chance to say, this is what the Democrats stand for, and by putting it out this early, he's trying to make it so that this is what the Democrats have.
Now, identifying what the Democrats stand for, that won't have much play with a Republican-controlled House. So what does that mean for 2018 and 2020 moving forward to their sort of electoral identification?
Well, that's his big goal. He's obviously not going to flip any Republicans. No Republican anytime soon is going to say, oh, we need single payer. His goal is to take those House seats that are already Democratic and make them even more liberal. He's looking to primary Democrats and send out these more liberal people in 2018 so that the left moves left as the right moves right. And going past that, as he gets all of these people moving to the left, he's hoping that 2020 candidates, a lot of whom have said that this is a good bill. You think about Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Liz Warren, Sanders himself. All of those people said they would vote for this bill as a symbolic gesture saying, all right, we're liberal enough, support us, and kind of take their base, galvanize them, and say, we're the people who will get this done.
And in 2018 and in 2020, I think the Democratic Party probably has to move beyond just being anti-Trump. They have to be clear about what their policies are. Do you think this is the type of issue that can galvanize voters and get people excited and going to the polls?
I think it really is. I think Democrats were looking for something. They do want more health care, and especially with a Republican push against it. The Democratic base, which didn't really turn out in 2016, is kind of galvanized with this. Obviously, the big risk is you're alienating moderates. But I think in this case, with the kind of push against healthcare and the popular support for it, moderates are more likely, some of them will leave the Democratic Party.
But with the push for the popularity of railing against healthcare, and there's still an opportunity for conservative senators such as Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy to kind of push through an anti-healthcare message. Do you think that that has any play moving forward?
I think the anti-healthcare message still definitely has play. Republicans are very against it. I don't think there's a Democratic senator or congressman who's going to vote for it. I think when we get to the point of a filibuster, there's going to be some big issues there. The Graham-Cassidy bill is an interesting thing in its own because it is a very moderate repeal of Obamacare. It's kind of Obamacare light, which is something that hasn't worked for them before. Rand Paul has already said he won't vote for it. So the Republicans are at about 51 votes now. They lose 2. They can't even push it through with a 50 majority. So I'm going to say there's not a great chance that it goes through. If by some miracle Graham and Cassidy are experienced enough to get that coalition together, there's a small chance, probably better than the other bills, but not much higher.
Single-payer health care may be a make-or-break issue for Democrats in 2018 and 2020.
Absolutely.
Dan, thanks so much for being
Thank you.
here.
Thanks, Tim.
The Rohingya ethnic group in western Myanmar continues to face targeted violence at the hands of the government. Talking Points contributor Elijah Shama tells us some are calling it an ethnic cleansing campaign. He'll be on when we get back.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
More than 400,000 Rohingya Muslims are fleeing Myanmar as a brutal military campaign continues against them. Myanmar says it's responding to deadly military attacks carried about by Rohingya groups in the West. But the UN now warns that the situation is turning into an issue of ethnic cleansing. Talking Points contributor Elijah Shama is in the studio to explain.
All right, the Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar have been described as the world's most friendless people by UN officials. This group of people reside in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, an area bordering Bangladesh. These people have faced persecution since the late 1970s, and Myanmar has never actually considered them citizens of the country, instead issuing them foreign identity cards. However, as recently as 2013, there were widespread reports for Human Rights Watch that Myanmar was participating in a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Rohingya people. These most recent allegations of ethnic cleansing have come up after the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, a Rohingya separatist group, attacked army bases and police stations in the Rakhine state. Over 1,000 people, mostly Rohingya, have been killed in the ensuing violence. Myanmar has denied any allegations of wrongdoing on their part, but 40% of the villages that the army has targeted are now empty. In addition to that, satellite footage shows many Rohingya villages having been set on fire or otherwise destroyed. It's estimated that 20,000 people fleeing the region a day, and survivors from the region are recounting tales of persecution and carnage. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has said Myanmar's leader and Nobel Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi has her last chance to save the region, saying to stop this. But Suu Kyi has responded saying that this fake news is helping the terrorists. What remains to be seen is how the international community or Myanmar protect the almost 1 million Rohingya still in country and the over 400,000 that have fled to neighboring areas.
Elijah, you mentioned Aung San Suu Kyi, who is a Nobel Prize winner. Why haven't we seen a stronger response from her?
It's really interesting because in Myanmar, while she is a Nobel Peace Prize winner and while she is kind of the de facto leader of this country, she still faces a fair amount of political kind of capital from the generals that are still in that region. And a lot of people have speculated that her kind of lack of a strong response is two-part. One, not trying to make herself look bad, and the fact that she doesn't want to anger the generals and really risk her very fragile hold on the power in Myanmar right now.
And in the past, we've seen the international community a little late on some ethnic cleansing issues, specifically the United States in Rwanda. What exactly can the international community do here to help things along?
Right now, there are aid groups that are kind of on the ground. We see the UN providing food aid for many of these refugees. Bangladesh is building a giant kind of refugee camp for the almost 400,000 people that have fled this country so far. We've kind of seen rally in terms of aid. And for the U.S.'s part, Rex Tillerson has said that if Myanmar continues this, we're going to see kind of decreases in military cooperation between the U.S. and Myanmar, which is something that they need for security.
Now, what's next for this situation? What is the global community looking towards, and what is the people of Myanmar looking towards?
The people of Myanmar are really kind of looking for answers. They really want people to turn away. The people that are doing this don't want any more light that's been shown on it to continue being shown on it. But the international community is very interested in investigations. The kind of speculation is still a little spotty. We have these satellite images and we have reports from reporters on the ground. But no one has actually gone into many of these villages or witnessed the ethnic cleansing happening. But the tales that kind of survivors are recounting are pretty grim.
Elijah, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll cover some of the stories you missed after the break. Don't go away.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes, B, console her,
don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed.
I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it.
I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
Here at Talking Points, we value in-depth coverage of the world's most pressing issues, but some stories don't capture mainstream attention.
This week, we have 2 important stories you may have missed.
Food shortages in Venezuela remain dangerously high as the country's political problems continue to affect the people. Inflation has increased to over 700%, leaving many Venezuelans unable to feed their families. In a widely criticized move, President Nicolas Maduro introduced a program to breed rabbits as a food source. The plan backfired, and Maduro was criticized by officials at home and abroad.
However, the president continues to resist aid from other nations, including the United States. Brazil, Canada, Peru, and Argentina are among other nations that have called on Venezuela to accept humanitarian aid. Maduro criticized the efforts of the U.S. to aid Venezuela, calling President Trump's actions interventionism. And the Venezuelan president has voices of support in his corner. Bolivian President Evo Morales accused President Trump and his allies of attempting to destabilize the region on Sunday. U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said dialogue between Venezuela and the United States is unlikely. U.S. Deputy Attorney General Robert Mueller might have a little more job security very soon. Mueller is leading the investigation into Russian influence in the 2016 election. The bill was introduced on Thursday to partner earlier legislation that protects Mueller from being dismissed. If the president attempts to dismiss Mueller, he can challenge the dismissal in court. The laws were drafted following President Trump's dismissal of FBI Director James Comey.
Mueller also made a recent breakthrough on the Russian investigation last week. Facebook discovered that Russian companies bought ads to cause chaos ahead of the election. The social media giant turned the ads over to Mueller, along with details on the ads' buyers. U.S. officials said that Facebook is one of the Russian investigation's primary focuses. Mueller also recently hired experts in mafia dealings and issued subpoenas for Donald Trump Jr.'s meetings with Russian officials. The White House has criticized Mueller's investigation as a witch hunt, but have yet to take action against Mueller.
And when we come back, Josh and I will discuss stories you should be paying attention to in the weeks ahead.
Maybe he's really focused.
Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
When they test you, stand firm and move only when you hear the seatbelt click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
As President Donald Trump takes the global stage at the UN General Assembly Tuesday, much is expected of him and how he plans to address a global audience. According to White House aides, he'll prioritize issues such as the threat of North Korea, U.S. interests in Iran and Syria, as well as the global terror threat. Trump was critical of the UN on the campaign trail, blaming its existence for much of the globalism that his populist base railed against. Calls for reform and limitations at the UN are anticipated, as the Trump administration is expected to ask member nations to pay in more to the organization and call for a streamlining of operations. Trump's America First message, the prioritization of domestic over international, and the push to step back from spending on the global stage, much like his message to NATO, is what the community will be focusing on. If the United States gives the impression that it doesn't care about the UN, the outcome could leave UN global operations in a vulnerable state. The administration is considering trying to make mandatory funding contributions voluntary, and by cutting off funding, diminish the global scale of the organization. White House National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster's message from his administration of accountability and sovereignty as a means for peace and prosperity will certainly be the main focus as Trump takes the podium. And how nations respond to varying priorities and restricted interests from the U.S. will be what I'm looking ahead to.
Earlier today, Democratic candidate Joe Nicoletti announced he was dropping out of the race to become the next mayor of Syracuse. Nicoletti lost last week's Democratic primary to Juanita Perez Williams. Despite earning the endorsement of the city's Democratic Party, Nicoletti pulled 2 points behind Perez Williams before losing handily. Nicoletti could have continued to run on the Working Families Party line, but threw his support behind Perez Williams instead. With a majority of registered voters in the city of Syracuse being Democrats, Perez Williams looks to hold an edge in November's mayoral race. However, independent Ben Walsh has been surging as of late and has far more campaign funds than the Democrat. With just 7 weeks left, this race is one to watch.
Well, that's all we have for tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for clips and full-length episodes. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And for all those here at Talking Points, I'm Josh Carney.
Good night.